looking back, I've just never been able to deal with change very well. I don't think I've gone through necessarily that much change, to
I
be
didn't see that
honest
one
with
coming.
you.
I did getting ready to strongly disagree with some points here.
Go for it.
I had a couple transforming years, moving to a new country, having a new job, building my own family, losing a piece of my family. Even though I'm really good at self-reflection, I hit those boundaries. Our parents were just in and it got disrupted. Reflection, it helps our brain to
What's motivating you every day to keep going? Look at an agile development in technology. There is no more A to B. There's no finish line anymore. And so how do you change that mentality where that's a new way of being? Hi guys, this is Helena, host of Where Boundaries Dissolves. Today we're switching it up. I have a co-host here. Usually
That
I
is
interview
exciting.
people. I'm here with Philipp. So happy that you're here and that we're doing this, Philipp. Backdrop to why we're doing this. We were talking about our vibe and that we have a good connection. We care about similar topics. And the reality is that the leaders that I talk to, we're just talking about how the constant evolution of technology and how fast it's changing is overwhelming. And so it's become so important that you become aware of your personal growth and how you're motivating yourself to attain the things you want to. We think that someone can learn from our experiences. I definitely think that I don't get everything right, but I do learn, and I am motivated and ambitious and driven. And some things I do get right. If we can talk about these things, I think that would make the world a better place if people are invested in their personal growth, because then you're overcoming certain fear and limitations that you have within yourself, and you're not acting from a place of fear. And so therefore you can be better at connecting with people. I'm joined here by Philipp, and we're going to be doing this series of growth moments that we're going to be sharing on a bi-weekly basis. And shoot us your questions. We have a few topics in mind that we want to talk about, but we'd love to get your input on this. What are we talking about, Philipp?
First of all, thanks for setting the stage today, Helena, and also thanks for the opportunity to be your co-host on this series. Some of our listeners, they might know me from one of your podcast episodes we did a couple months ago. And you're absolutely right. We had conversations since then. And yeah, we had that moment where we realized all these conversations, whether it's a small topic or a big topic, they always go into conversations about deeper things, whether it's changes in society, cultural norms, business changes, technology acceleration. We had the idea to, instead of meeting and talking about these things without putting it out there, that maybe this can help either, as you just said, leaders or leaders of the future. Because that is really one thing that I felt in the past, is that growth happens mostly in your early years, when you graduate college, when you're in college, when you have your first job. This is also the time where most young talents, they don't really know what to do and where to go. And I have the feeling we can give a lot of guidance to these people. So let's see how that resonates and how the content we discuss today can help. Yeah, I have a first question for you. You just talked about constant change. And the last year, whether it's technology or culture or climate change, it's everywhere. How do you handle it personally? How do you stay up to date? Do you embrace the change? Are you challenged by it? Do you feel uncomfortable? If you feel uncomfortable, how do you handle it?
Such a loaded question.
Hell yeah.
To be honest with you, I feel like my life has been constant change. And you made such an interesting point when you said, when you're a young professional, you're exposed to a lot of growth. And instantly in my mind, I was like, oh, does that mean we don't grow after? But I think it's different, because you go through natural cycles of, like, you go to school and this, so kind of change happens from the outside and it's expected almost. Okay, now this kind of change and this kind of change, and you look for a new job, and it's, it doesn't make it less stressful, but at least you're aware and things happen and you grow, and it's expected that you grow. And suddenly we reach adulthood, and for a long time this factory mentality, you go to the same job for 40 years, same company for 40 years, and things kind of, and now are we talking about growth at work, where we also understand the neurology better. Like, we can actually grow and learn and evolve. So I think that's fascinating. But to answer your question with regards to how I deal with like ongoing change, I feel like my entire life has been ongoing change. Looking back in a more rational way, I feel I've just never been able to deal with change very well. I don't think I've gone through necessarily that much change, to
I
be
didn't see that
honest
one
with
coming.
you.
I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. I had to have a real honest conversation with myself. It's like, okay, you talk about having moved around so much as a kid and having moved around and gone to this and that, but I didn't I didn't move to a zillion countries. You know, there's people out there who've lived in quite a few different countries. Like my mom, for example, she grew up in a family where they moved every 2 years because her dad, my granddad, was in the Air Force and he was this high ranking officer. And so they just had to move around a bunch.
Yeah, yeah.
And she never talks about, oh, my life has been ongoing change. But somehow that seems to be my narrative that I'm dealing with ongoing change. And so I've just had to realize that I just suck at dealing with change. And that's why it feels like every little change is this huge thing in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm. Do you think it might be the generation that we look a lot more at growth, change, we reflect more, we talk more about it, and that the generations before us, they just did it?
that's a really good question. I definitely feel like we do talk about it more and it helps because when you don't and you just deal with it, you're not actually dealing with it. And so it just mirrors in your lack in ability to communicate and talk about emotions, which then creates disconnection. And I mean, if you look at divorce rates, it's not exactly great. You know, if you look at
mm-hmm.
personal relationships,
mm-hmm.
and I do think that that's improving. Like in my personal relationship, and I've learned so much in my relationships, like all the failed ones,
mm-hmm.
communication being huge and vulnerability being huge, being able to share openly how you feel and why
mm-hmm.
you got triggered and taking responsibility for your triggers and why you're moving through things. And now I'm in a much better place in my life because of it.
So you would actually say the reflection through the change that you weren't able to cope with in the best way, but the reflection helps you to be ready for the future and for change. I mean, change is going to happen. I think it's only going to happen faster, more frequently, whether it is in our personal environment, whether it is your investments, that it might be in stock or in real estate. And for decades, we had pretty much constant growth into the same direction with a little hiccup every 5 or 6 years when something happened. But it seems like this process that our parents were just in and growing in, it got disrupted. And it seems like right now is the beginning of a period of time that is constant change. So I think if you're able to handle it better through reflection, and that might be also something to our listeners, if you're young or if you're already an established leader, reflection is key, because I think it helps our brain to understand what's going on. It helps our brain to understand what's going on inside of us, outside of us. And we see clearer if we digest and reflect. So yeah, I think that's a good first take. Based on your experience, growth moments, you pretty much, you work through it, you reflect on it, and you get better.
I think there's something to be said about that definitely being the first step, self-reflection, so that you're not, you know, suppressing stuff that you have to deal with, which, as we know, like emotions, they just get louder. They're like knocks on the door. And if you ignore the knock on the door, it just gets bigger. And at some point, you're just overwhelmed and you're burning out.
I have a question to that.
Yeah.
Where do you think are the boundaries of self-reflection when you want to grow?
What do
How
you mean
far
the boundaries?
Self-reflection for me means you educate yourself, you do your personal development, and you're able to digest your thoughts within yourself. But do you think that there are boundaries, how far you can go without having externals, whether it is a coach, a mentor, that helps you to do the reflection? I'm asking because it's a personal example. I would say I'm really, really far with self-reflection, but I had a couple transforming years, moving to a new country, having a new job, building my own family, losing a piece of my family. And even though I'm really good at self-reflection, I hit those boundaries. I wasn't able to do what worked for 10 years. It didn't work anymore. I wasn't able to just think and put together a vision board or write my thoughts down. It was too much to handle by my own head. And I talked to external people in order to become clear again.
Yeah, I appreciate that question so much. And I appreciate you opening up about that so much, because I had this belief that we go through life with people, but we're always alone. And that's a really dark thought to have. Because I don't know what kind of thing I experienced as a little child that led me to believe that. And I don't even think it's important. I used to think it's important to understand where these thoughts come from, but there's no way I can uncover that. But I do have this belief that fundamentally we all die by ourselves. And
all right.
Yeah. And so the whole thing that I kept coming down to was like, well, you're in it by yourself any which way. And I've changed that over the course of the past few months, where I don't believe that anymore. I think that we don't go through this life by ourselves, and we don't die by ourselves, that we are supported. And with that shift in mindset also comes the belief that I don't think we can do it by ourselves. Like I was like you, that I thought, oh, for whatever reason, I was the eldest. I always had to like be the strong person, or at least I assigned that to myself. And so I always had this thing. I was like, oh, I've got to be the strong one. I've got to get through this thing. I've got to push through those initial barriers and find my own way and all the things. And that may all hold true, but maybe I could have done it with more ease and more peace of mind had I allowed for help in my life, had I been able to express when I was struggling. And that's where it starts, with being able to like own when you are struggling with something, which was for me super hard, because that meant, oh, you're actually weak. You can't deal with it. And so I do think that there are limitations to how far you can deal with it with yourself, because I feel like sometimes you get caught in a rabbit hole and you don't really know out, and you can't really see your own limiting beliefs, because we're so used to our brains justifying everything in some way that we're so bought into our own narratives and our limiting beliefs. I was given the analogy, it's like your subconscious is you riding an elephant. This is a massive elephant, and you think that if you tell it to go right, it's going to go right. But if that elephant wants to go left, it's going left. And here is your little brain saying, oh, we wanted to go left all along. And I learned something on the way. You're not in control of your subconscious. It's a response. It's strategies that you've built up over the years because of experiences that you've made and coping strategies, right? And so uncovering those limiting beliefs is, I think, really necessary to work with a coach, a psychologist, a therapist, whatever it is, whoever you find. But I've also been extremely fortunate to have met a really good coach in 2021 who I trusted,
very good,
who I could open up to and actually start sharing certain things, where he would like call me out in my loops.
I would say that is the first step everyone has to go, has to take, has to accept, as you just said. And I think especially the leaders of the future, Gen Z, I think they're doing actually a really good job showing I'm not perfect, showing I want to grow. I think we have to make sure that they are part of a society where this is accepted. I think we are by now partially responsible to create such a society. There's one other thing I wanted to say about the adaptation to constant change and also constant growth. One thing I realized in the past year is that I totally overestimated for many, many years. I overestimated how much I can control.
Word.
And I realized that we don't control a lot. Like, let's say you're in a company, and the company has 1,000 employees, and the market is going down, and everyone is going crazy, and everyone tries their best, but the market is still going down. And people think that if the individual just pours in everything into that topic, that things are going to change. But the realization was that there are a couple things we can influence, but that area, it isn't that big. It is pretty much, you can influence your health, you can influence your readiness, right? How ready are you to take on the challenges of the day? That means, again, good sleep, healthy nutrition. You can work out to make yourself stronger, to make yourself mentally stronger. You can do reflection, internal, external, what we just talked about. Those are the things pretty much to set the foundation to be ready for whatever happens out there. But a couple of years ago, I thought I could control everything. And then I think that period of time with COVID, inflation, my first winter in California was one of the worst winters ever. And I was freaking out about it. I said, why is it raining all the time? Until I realized I have absolutely no power on this topic, over this topic. So I would say that is the next big thing here is change happens. And we have to accept that there's not a lot you can actually do about it. Only those small things that make yourself ready for whatever is coming. Is there new technology arising? Let's take the example of AI and generative AI for a second. Well, you will not, if you're an individual and you completely go crazy about it and you hate it, maybe if you're Elon Musk and you're that person, you can change something. But if you're an individual somewhere in a country, somewhere in a city, and you invest all your time into that topic, most likely it's not going to change the direction of that topic. But what you can do is, based on your thoughts, you can prepare yourself to be ready for whatever happens. And if that means that knowledge worker jobs are cut by 30% in certain areas, and you're in that field, well, you can either try to learn something new, or you can accept the fact and become one of the best people working with a new technology. And I think that's one of the core things I would love to discuss and address. And maybe you can add some thoughts or examples to this topic that, well, this world is big and everybody has their own life and everybody tries to be great, but the power we have over our environment is smaller than we think.
I mean, it kind of comes back to why it's so important to talk about growth, right? Because I'm reminded of our circle of influence, right? This is where we're at. You can't change the world. You can change your corner of the world, which means you can change yourself. And when you focus on that, you can take control of what's in your circle of influence. And as you grow, that circle of influence grows with you, right? It becomes a little larger. And I think that's why being able to look into personal growth and development is so important. And what's changing right now is the pace of change. And so I think now it doesn't suffice anymore to do things for power, status, or money, because you'll actually exhaust yourself. I think what's changing is like, okay, what's the purpose? What are you going after? What's that bigger vision? What's motivating you every day to keep going? You know, you look at an agile development in technology, there is no more A to B. The finish line, there is no finish line anymore. We keep evolving. And so how do you change that mentality where you're going from a sprint to an ongoing marathon? That's a new way of being. That's a new type of meaning that you have to hold on to, because there's no finish line. And so
sometimes this is exactly what the young generation, let's talk 20 to 23-year-olds right now, what they are criticized for. They are criticized wanting purpose. Yes,
I know.
They and you talked about this fact that you have automatic growth while you go to college and while you go to school. And then these young, bright minds coming maybe from top universities, they hit the workforce. And you have very established leaders there that then tell them, well, welcome to the firm, do this job for 3 or 4 years, and I don't want to hear anything from you.
Basically.
How should they, in a
Soul
world
crushing.
in a world where some of their friends might have gained 2 million followers on TikTok in a week, right?
Wow.
where people have friends who make millions of dollars a month when they're 21 years old, doing dances, music, gaming.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then there are people who are actually going into fields that create technology that make the world more sustainable. And they hit the market and they are paid, they have a student loan, they're getting paid some amount of money. Is it fair? Is it competitive? Should they ask for it?
Mhm.
How should they handle such a situation when you're constantly growing and you see some of your friends having this insane growth, and all you see on social media is people who have this insane growth in their life? And then
Mhm.
you hit a world that is so different, where growth happens every 3 years and it's maybe 5 to 10% growth every 3 years.
Mhm.
What would be your recommendation to those people? I have an opinion on it, but I would be really interested in your opinion.
My first thought is the grass is always greener on the other side. And in a world where
Good
everything is
point.
so instant, it's easy to see the followers and to see the glam because that's what's promoted.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, and honestly, being in LA and being in touch with so many creators, it's not as glamorous as you think. Like it's a lot of lonely work, repetitive work, and you're not interacting with a huge community of people. So I would say number one, get curious about the environment that you or the options that you see. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to be creative, talk to a creator, or do it for a little while and feel into what that actually means. If you want to work at a company, go and talk to someone who works at a company who's been doing that for a while, who you can connect with. That's always what I've done, is like gotten really curious about what it feels like and what it looks like. And then do it, but do it like make a decision and do it for a year or two so that you can actually get your hands dirty. So you actually know what it even means, because the first 6 months are going to suck regardless, anything you do. Like it's just hard. You're learning, you're evolving, you're going to fall on your nose. It's not going to feel like you're in your purpose because you're not. You still have your training wheels on. How could you be standing in your power? So it's understanding the different phases that you're going through as you're evolving. And so give yourself the time to evolve. And once you reach that 2 year mark, the impact that you can have is going to be different, whether you are a creator, whether you are in your first job. And I think we have this notion, and I think number three, to summarize, I think we go through this life expecting to find the job, expecting to find the company, expecting to find the relationship, the best partner, because that's what's been marketed to us all our lives. In movies, wherever you look, there's always that dream thing. And I think it's nonsense. I really do. I don't think there's a dream job. I don't think there's like, I mean, I don't know. I have a dream partner, but it's also hard. Like we work on ourselves and we work on the relationship, and we don't expect the partnership to be just amazing because it is, right? There's a lot of work that goes into it, nurturing it. And there is not the purpose that we somehow at some point land into, and then life's amazing. There is no utopic state to attain. I think every job, whether you're building your own company, whether you work at a startup, whether you have work at a corporate, has aspects that you're going to hate about it. There's
Mm-hmm.
always a trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something that you're learning, that you need to learn. And so if we can see life as our playgrounds where we are constantly letting it coach us and letting us teach us something, and it's not, oh my God, I'm not where I want to be yet, then you can actually be more present in the moment, be more curious, and actually extract what there is to be extracted from that situation. Do you know how many times I've thought in my year this year, oh my God, have I made the right decision going into a startup? I don't have access to these resources. This, I'm taking a hit financially. I'm taking a hit here. I don't have access to, like, all of the reasons. But then I really
Yeah.
had to force myself to see all of the reasons why this was a great decision. Because otherwise you go in hindsight and you look and you're like, oh, well, this, and this was good. And this, and this was good. And
Mm-hmm.
why can't we appreciate that in the moment? It
Mm-hmm.
takes a conscious effort. And I think that's like a mindset shift that we have to have as well. Um, Going into our careers and in general dealing with life. I don't know. What do you think?
Getting ready to strongly disagree with some points here
Go
for
for
the
it. I
first
want to
time.
hear it. Let's go.
Yeah, so
I want to
first
hear.
first of all, yes, the grass is not green on the other side. That I echo 100%. That is true. The other thing is also there is not the perfect match. Even though I also echo you on the relationship side, I was really lucky there. It can happen, and it feels like this even after 12 years. But
Wow, I love
the
that.
disagreement goes into, and that I tell a lot of people who work with me, who work for me, who are young, who are graduating from college. If you don't like what you're doing, and if you realize that after 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, I think this sentence of you got to stay in your job for 2 to 3 years. Otherwise, it looks bad on your CV. Otherwise, you won't learn. Otherwise, you won't see. That is something I had to make the decision early on in my career because I got hired out of college into a job that looked great from the outside. And 2.5 months into the job, I hated it. Did I grow? Did I learn? Yes. But I also felt that there was something else. I knew that this is not right. This is not my purpose. And also that I'm selling myself under my own value. And
Wow.
I had a long conversation with my family on that topic. And then I made the decision to quit, let's call it like this, to move back from Berlin to my hometown and be officially unemployed for a couple months, move back in my room pretty much. And then I took that as a learning and I started to apply to 5 jobs a day for 4 weeks. And the result of that was tons of interviews, insights into multiple companies, and then offers from multiple companies. And that in the end led me to the talent program with Siemens. But if I would have stayed there for 3 years, my career would have been completely different. My happiness would have been completely different. My trajectory would have been completely different. And I always tell people who graduate college or who are in college, your job is a vehicle to get you money to pay for life. That is it. Your job is not your life. Try to find a job that is close to who you are and who you want to become, so that it supplements not only your bank account or paying off loans or getting like financial security, but it also helps you to grow in a field where you want to grow. I had that situation where over more than 2 years, I was able to grow in a field where I wanted to grow. And that was innovation, digital products, innovating together with clients, building prototypes, being into corporate venture capital with the Next 47. That was all in that field. And then COVID happened and my role shifted and I got into a field where I didn't feel that anymore. I didn't feel like my job, my 9 to 5, was leading to the place where I wanted to go or to who I wanted to become. And I did it again. Once again, I said, I'm sorry, this is, and it's like this relationship conversation. It's not a decision against you, but it's for something else. And I encourage young people to honestly be bold, try it out. But if you don't like it, the job at Amazon that you thought would be your dream job, if it's actually not making you happy and you're 25, 26 years old, those are important years of your life. And life is too short to just sit there for the money and for I was there for 3 years. And especially in today's world, I would encourage people to actually ask yourself, be honest, and then change if you're not feeling happy.
Honestly, I love the courage that comes with that. And maybe I don't have as much courage as you and self-confidence. That's a likely factor. There's another factor that helps me understand why I do feel personally I need to be in a certain thing and do it for at least 6 months to a year.
Why is that?
Because I feel like only through doing do I actually understand whether this is for me. And this is coming down to something that we keep disagreeing on in conversations. Like you have a very clear vision. I don't. I'm here and I wish I did. I really, really wish I did. For me, everything in life is a surprise. I swear to God, like LA, never in my books. Never did I imagine in my wildest dreams that I was going to be moving to the US. When I was 16, I thought I was going to not be traveling the world because I had all these allergies. I had to work through
Mhm.
so much emotional stuff that I keep surprising myself of what I'm able to do. And so
That is
for
amazing.
me, you know, and so for me going into these jobs, I'm like, oh my God, I don't really know. I'm so afraid, but I'm going to do it for another month, for another month. And so it's more like building that courage to actually show myself that I can do it. And then when I'm in it and I kind of understand what it means and how I feel into it, it's very hard for me to gauge before I go into something whether this
Mhm.
is something for me. And so I need
Mhm.
to give it a little bit of a try so that I can experience through doing whether this is a fit for me or not. I've just been very fortunate that I'm very strategic in my thinking. So if I go into something, I'm like, well, this will give me the skills A, B, C, and D. If I do
Mhm.
this, this is the outcome. And I've always
Mhm.
kept it as general as possible so that I can build on it in different ways. I'm very strategic with my decision making, but if I know whether this is something for me, no clue.
Very strategic approach to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that people can take away from this conversation as well. When you make a decision, and I also do that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you fail, even when you do it, what would be the worst case result?
Mm-hmm.
And does it contribute to where you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And there is this mindset too, there's always more. Like the job you're in is never the last job. Like if this fails, if this doesn't turn out, it doesn't mean
mhm.
you're a failure or that life ends.
Yeah.
There's always more to be found. Even, you know, like there's this notion oftentimes where people kind of stay in relationships because it's comfortable and they feel like they're not going to find someone better.
Mhm.
Somehow work
But
on
they
that
can be all
thought,
relationships. They can be friends, companies,
work or yeah,
partners,
exactly.
no matter what. And I
Exactly.
see I see it all the time. But here's
Mm-hmm.
the thing, you just said something that is tangible for people in our age group, where
Mm-hmm.
like there's another job, but
Mm-hmm.
what if there isn't?
Mm-hmm.
People sometimes their life ends pretty fast.
This
And I do ask myself sometimes if this would end today, would I be happy? Would I be proud with what I achieved? And I think this gives me a sense of urgency. There's also
yeah.
this amazing speech from Steve Jobs at Stanford University where he talks
Mm-hmm.
about if you need purpose, if you don't know why to get up, just imagine this would be your last day. What would you do? How would you change today? Would you stay in this job? Would you
Mm-hmm.
take this job? Would you stay in this relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Would you stay in the country you live in? Would you stay in the city you live in? Would
Mm-hmm.
you keep eating the foods you eat? And if those questions are a no, then you better change it.
Mm-hmm.
And I constantly ask myself those
Wow.
questions. Am I proud of myself?
Mm-hmm.
Am I doing what I want to do? Am I becoming who I want to become?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a very natural, I don't know why or how I developed it. I think I developed it through sports, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
that I have a very natural feeling in myself when I do things that are not contributing to the vision I have.
Mm-hmm.
I think that comes from years and years of yeah, nutrition and pretty much bodybuilding, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a big role model, where whenever you eat the wrong things for 2 days, you feel it, you see it
Oh,
immediately.
100%.
You have that compass in your head, and by now it's like if I do the wrong things for 5 days that are actually, if this is my vision to the right and these things are driving me to the left, like I watch TV instead of reading a book, um I go and sleep instead of working out or meeting someone new. This internal compass, it just starts. It tells me,
You're
man,
derailing.
where are you going? What are you doing?
But
And
that's creates so much pressure. How'd you deal with that pressure? To be constantly like you're measuring yourself against a benchmark that is, I hear it. Like I've had the same, all cylinders going all the time. Come on,
yeah,
girl, let's keep it going.
yeah,
Food, work, like, you know,
yeah,
and high performing all the time. Like, how'd
yeah.
you, is there any wiggle room? Is there any like understanding for yourself when you are going through a hard time in life to like give yourself that compassion and that space to feel.
Yeah. So I think this is a good closing point for today's session. I used
Like, I'm not going there.
No,
I'm
I'm
kidding.
going there. I'm going there, but this is a good closing and a good opener for next time. But
Mm.
I used to think that something's wrong with that because society told me to. I used to think that I'm creating the stress on myself. I'm always growing. I wanna be fitter than last year. I want to be wealthier than last year. I want to have a better network than last year. And this is not mainstream. And then I used to think, oh my God, I can't relax. Oh my God, I can't just chill when I'm on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? When I tried to relax on vacation, I felt worse.
Mm-hmm.
And
Feel you.
I had a really, really interesting conversation with my coach 2 weeks ago. And he said, what if growth makes you happy?
Oh my
You're
God.
looking for happiness in your life, but what if constant growth is actually what makes you happy?
Feel that
And
and
whether
give
this
into
is,
it.
yeah, and just
Stop fighting it.
accept it and lean into it. And from that moment, I have goosebumps for myself.
I
This is
love it.
terrible. But from that moment on, 2 weeks ago, I just let it flow.
Yeah.
And the acceleration of my life, my mood in the last 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
has been absolutely mind blowing.
That is really a beautiful note to end this on.
Yeah.
And we
Also
should
something we
explore
can
that
discuss
more.
next time. Yes.
Exactly. What if growth makes you happy? What does that even look like?
Yeah, it's something that society doesn't push you
And
towards, to be
no,
honest. It's
it's always
like,
this static point. Like when you've reached this job, when you have this car, when you have this home, when you have
mhm,
this partner, when you
mhm,
all the
yeah,
things. And that's a very
yeah,
static and linear way and polarizing way of looking at life as well.
yeah. And maybe we can focus on that topic. We're looking forward to receiving feedback, questions, topics for the next episode. And I can't wait to jump back on.
Reach out to us, Philipp Vin, Helena Suter on LinkedIn. Send us over your questions. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for tuning in,
Thank
and
you.
we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Thanks,
Two
guys.
weeks. Thank you.